At MyHin, and my focus has been acting as a product owner for the Common Key service, Acres, among a few other smaller projects. So Bo asked me to come here today to talk about the evolution of patient matching and Common Key service in Acres and some of the work that we're doing. And I chose to use my 15 minutes to talk about some of the work that we're doing on the Common Key service to improve matching and our confidence in matches through the Common Key service. So I'm going to tell a short story starting with what the Common Key service is. Essentially, the Common Key service is an enterprise master person or patient index that's configured to resolve patient identities across disparate data sources that are submitting data to the Health Information Exchange. So that's what its job is. It's to take data that comes to MyHin, extract patient data from it, and resolve it to other known identities. So how does the Common Key service or an eMPI do that? There are actually several ways that an eMPI could resolve identity. The way the Common Key service does it is it uses demographics that are found in the patient-centered data, and it pulls them out, sends it to the eMPI, and the eMPI generates a score for that data. And it uses things like SSN or last name or first name or phone number, and it looks in the eMPI to see if it has data that matches the data in the message, and then it scores each field, and it sums the total of the matches, and it ends up with a score that's below our matching threshold and indicates a new patient identity. So it indicates that the eMPI has never seen this patient before, and we're going to create a patient identity using those demographics, and we're going to assign it a brand new common key. Or it's above our matching threshold, which means that it matches something, an identity that's already in the eMPI, and we're going to get the common key for that identity, and we're going to return it. Or it ends up somewhere in the middle where we don't feel like the score was low enough to create a brand new identity, and we don't feel like the score was high enough to match it. And what we want to do is look at it, and we add it to a manual work list, and a data steward will actually put their eyes on that match and make a decision about whether that's a new identity or if it matches an existing identity. That's the gist. All those columns on this slide above just show some of the nuance of how things match and how the scores that are assigned might differ between an exact match and a single character mismatch, or a phonetic match like, John Jon and John John, or a synonym match like John Jean and John. All those things can be configured and optimized. And then in addition to these, there can be rules like whitelists and blacklists, and not letting like baby be first name and things like that. So in a nutshell, that's how matching happens. So why can't we just use demographics consistently with high confidence to do identity resolution? There tends to be 4 challenges. One is that the demographics will change over time. So last names, phone numbers, addresses, things like that are always changing. So you can't always just match to what's in the eMPI. The second is that full demographic data is not captured consistently for all data that's sent to MyHin. So SSN being one, middle name, etc. Everybody doesn't capture everything every time. It's always contextual. Third, organizations and systems have different workflows around demographics, and those things end up in the eMPI, like baby for newborns, or SSNs that people don't want to capture but systems require, and they get entered in as all 9s. And that creates noise and problems on the eMPI. And then lastly is we make errors as humans, and those end up in the eMPI, and they create noise as well. So what does an eMPI need to do high confidence identity resolution? It's definitely demographics, as I just showed. Those scores, high quality demographics consistently would allow us to do identity resolution across organizations for patients. But the other part of that is assigning authority IDs and local IDs. Which might not be familiar to everyone, but you could actually construct an identity resolution system based solely on identifiers. If everyone agreed to send data with their local IDs and SSN, we'll say, we could actually just cross-reference between everybody's patient data using that common identifier SSN, and we could link everybody together. That's not actually feasible, and that's not something that we could do, but that is an identity resolution scheme that could be implemented. The reality is that we need to use a hybrid of our patient demographics and our known identifiers for patients to consistently create high confidence identity resolutions. And then the result of an identity resolution, again, is matching to an existing patient or the creation of a new patient's identity. So the rest of this conversation is going to be about how do we use demographics and local identifiers to create a hybrid solution that meets our objectives. And I'm going to just introduce that with a simple example or a question. Is this, what's on the screen, enough to identity resolve a patient? First name, last name, and date of birth. And if you could imagine that each one of these rows is a different message or a file that has patient data in it, I think everyone would agree that it's not. John Smith with a one character mismatch on the birth date on those last two rows. I have no idea if that's the same John Smith, if that's just an error on the birth date, or if that's actually a different John Smith. And when your identity space gets of any size at all, you're going to have collisions on John Smiths with the same birth date as well. So that's not enough demographic data. So how about this? Is this enough demographics? And in this case, we actually have a local ID like the MRN. So the patient ID, we have first name, last name, date of birth, we have gender, we have address, we have phone number, and we have SSN. And the answer is that most of that is enough data. You could make a high confidence identity resolution on most of that, the green stuff on the bottom. But the top one, all we have still is first name, last name, date of birth. And now we have this patient identifier. And the problem with that is that we don't know who issued that patient identifier. So we don't know if these are just coincidentally the same identifiers from two different, completely different assigning authorities or issuers of the patient identifier. And if we did know that that was the same patient identifier, we could actually match with limited demographics, first name, last name, and date of birth, because we would also have an identifier that is unique that we could use to link, basically. So in this example, at the top, we have those top two rows, and in the bottom, we show that if we added issuer ID, prob1, and that was the same issuer for both IDs, we could use that issuer ID in combination with limited demographics to sanity check, first name, last name, and date of birth, and we could actually match that patient and return the common key for them. So why is that important, or what is the net impact of using a hybrid patient linking and demographic strategy? It gives you the opportunity to do something like this, where you have high quality demographics from one message type, like an ADT, that's enough to establish a new identity or match to an existing identity. And then you get limited demographics in another data source, like an APS file, but you have the issuer ID or the assigning authority ID and the patient ID, and you can use that to link the patient to the existing patient in the common key service using just the limited first name, last name, and date of birth. And that improves your positive match rate and your confidence in the matches that you're making. So we're spending a lot of our calories right now. We're not ignoring quality demographics, because that is the foundation of our identity resolution strategy. But we're spending a lot of our calories on understanding the issuer or the assigning authority for all of the patient identifiers in the data that is coming to Mayan, by working with our stakeholders to map that data to the appropriate assigning authority ID in a router table, essentially. And it's going to be a process. So we're going to have to work with each sender of data to understand how to map their assigning authorities for their local IDs. But the benefit will be higher confidence matches and a higher match rate across our data sources. And Bo, that's all I had for today. So I don't know if we want to do some Q&A or.
Yeah, let's catch up on the chat. Matt, there's a couple that came in. So B Dennis says, I see for patient demographics, ethnicity and race are not included. So I believe that just means we don't use those elements for patient matching purposes, correct?
Right.
Yeah, and they are included. They weren't included in my simple examples because I was just trying to make the point, right? But they are fields that we could use to match on in the EMPI. This is not our actual scoring model, but this is a typical EMPI scoring model on the screen. And those tend to be scored low because of the variability in those fields and not being captured consistently, et cetera. They obviously don't get scored as highly as last name, first name, date of birth, things that are consistently applied to patients and unique.
Great. Thank you. I was just mentioning it because I know that everything is starting to gear up and they're actually collecting more race and ethnicity data. So
yeah,
but you do have it there. So great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there. And yeah, just to make this point, like our strategy right now is heavily skewed towards demographics. We're trying to score everything and then resolve it. And we're kind of missing the boat on the linking opportunity here. I don't think that means we stop trying to get better demographics and use more demographics to your point. Like those are opportunities to improve our match rate, and the higher quality demographics we have, the better our performance will be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. The next question was from Anu, who asks, what percentage of the ACRES patients MyHIN receives contains a common key?
I do not know that off the top of my head. Does anyone else?
So Anu, is the question like when people submit ACRES files, how many of them are including the MyHIN common key on their ACRES submission?
Or is the question who's actually sending common key and for what? Oh, it looks like Anu's connecting to audio.
Okay.
You want to try and come back to Anu?
Yeah, we'll come back. So let's move to Chelsea's. If we send a version of our own common key, we send EMPI. Does MyHIN store and use that for matching when data is received from our OID?
Yeah, they're sending common key service in the data. How is that being used, right? I would say that is the same space as here. It's an opportunity, right? So that's a patient identifier. It's a global patient identifier, and it could be leveraged to strengthen our matching.
Infuriating.
Oh, Anu. Oh, no.
Sorry.
If everyone could just check their mutes, I think a few people are off mute. But did we have Anu come on voice?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Was double muted. My question was just relating to, yes, the ACRES files that are submitted by the POs, you know, what percentage are you seeing? Because that would be the first level of match, right? If the common key was available. So I was just trying to see what does that look like across POs?
Yeah, and yeah, Anu, sorry, I don't have that number. And I don't know. I don't think anyone else on my inside has that, but we can get that for you.
Okay.
And Chelsea asked a similar question, which we were just starting to answer.
Oh,
So
got it.
agree, like that to me, the common key on the input side is the same opportunity to do a patient link off of an identifier as getting the assigning authority in the local ID, right? Let me jump forward and see if this makes sense. If instead of issuer ID and local ID, we had common key, first name, last name, date of birth, that's enough. Like that's a cross reference off of an ID. And if we looked up that common key and had an exact match on first name, last name, date of birth, that's a high confidence match.
That was
So
the plan, right, Matt? I mean, wasn't that the plan?
that was the plan.
Everybody would be sending the common key.
But whose common key wins? You know what I mean? Like, so like our common key always remains the same, our EMPI, although our patient demographics change because it's a culmination of, you know, wherever their EMRs are, multiple. So if we send it, but then that patient happens to also see somebody else that has a common key, how do they get like agglomerated together?
Yeah, like I should have made another slide. But like let's just take like this Trish Franklin. Let's just say this is all the same person. Actually, I'm going to take this one. Let's say this is all the same person. In the EMPI, this is one identity. This all maps to a single common key. So we would be keeping all these local identifiers with Trish under a single common key. And it's not about winning, it's about cross-referencing between all of the known identifiers for Trish. So if you gave me the common key, I should be able to tell you all of the identifiers that relate to Trisha. And
That one.
But that's not how it's configured today. And it's because, Joanne, I think you were going there. That's what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be, we'll just give you the global ID, you keep that and send it back to us every time, and then we'll tell you who your data relates to.
And send it to, don't send it to us, but send it to anybody else in the network. Understand that's what it was. Right. And the problem with that is that does require everybody in the network to do it and do it consistently. And if everybody doesn't do it, then you start to have gaps. And the reality is that we can continue to use common key where it's available for the organizations that have it, because it is an identifier and that can be cross-referenced or used to link back to Trisha, right? Like Trisha has a common key. She also has local IDs. We can use any of her local IDs or her common key to link back to her patient identity. And that's where we're weak. That's where we could have an opportunity to evaluate the data that comes in, look at the local ID. We need to know who issued the local ID. So we have to have that assigning authority ID, but look at that and cross-reference over to Trish to do a sanity check on limited demographics and make a match. Or look at the common key if it's in the data and do the exact same thing.
So Matt, is it fair to summarize that the big evolution that's kind of being worked on is you don't necessarily have to send MyHIN's common key. You can send your own identifier value and still benefit from the increased matching.
That's right. We need to use, like when you think about identity resolution, you could purely do it off of demographics, but then you'd need really good demographics every time. Or you could purely do it off of identifiers, as long as you had some global identifier that we could use to link everybody's local identifier. And neither of those are realistic scenarios, because we can't do either one. We can't get consistently great demographics every time, and we can't get a global identifier from everybody all the time. But we can make a hybrid solution where we evaluate if we have a known local identifier that we can cross-reference into our EMPI to find the other identifier, the common key, or if we have really good demographics, if we can use that to score it and match it and get the identity. That's what we need to do. And if you send us the common key, I don't think it's as important that we know your assigning authority ID, because we could use that and we could cross-reference with it. And if you don't send us the common key, we really need to know, where did that local identifier come from? Like, what is its issuer? Because if we knew that, we could use it in the same way. We could link it into an identity that's already in the NPI.
Thank you, Matt. So I think the idea would be we're starting to collect and record the assigning authority and these various IDs. So if Bo Bornacki has a contract number with Priority Health, let's say of 123, and then I go to a PO, a practice part of a PO like Answer Health, and they have a different number for me, we would capture all those. And then if any of those numbers were sent along with any type of message like an ADT, we would be able to use that to positively identify Bo. Right.
Right. Like this message right now, there's nothing we can really do with that. There's just not enough in it. But if we have the issuer ID and we've seen that issuer ID before and we were able to link it or match it to somebody, now this is enough. And we can actually match that and give you back a common key for this person or route it, do whatever we need to do.
Okay. So let's burn through some more of the chats. Sorry, did someone want to speak up?
Yeah, Bo, I just wondering why my hand cannot be this authority. You already have a mitigate. You already issue this or collect this information. So why not to create a service? Let's say PO is paying you a monthly fee, whatever, but you become this authority that we could go and grab this ID, because priority ID is changing constantly. Membership, we know how membership IDs are changing. Blue Cross is, it's one of the problem that we're dealing with Healthy Blue. So why my hand cannot become state of Michigan authority and offer the services to everyone on this call and everyone who is using this IDs?
Like just to play that back, why can't we expose some service that lets you pass us your local ID and get all the known identifiers? That's what you're asking?
Yes, yeah, I'd like to have a simple solution that I could obtain the unique ID that everyone is using in state of Michigan.
Yeah,
I thought that is going to be the solution. And as a matter of fact, in my chat, I put that I was surprised. The last ACRES file we received back from you had 100% common key assigned to the entire our population. 100%. So every patient that we send it to you had the common key assigned.
Which is maybe a misleading number, though, because what you don't know in that is how many were matched and how many created new identities. If you have enough demographics, it might just be creating, like maybe 70% of them were matched to the existing patients, and therefore we could do something useful with. And maybe 30%, I'm just making these numbers up, but maybe 30% we didn't match to somebody and we just created a new identity and sent you a common key. Like, we need to know that.
And it's fine. But like I said, it's the first time when the entire ACRES file had the perfect list of common keys.
Yeah.
And we could use it. And again, we don't care if it was previously assigned or it's a newly assigned. As long as we have this 40-character ID, it's a perfect tool for all our processing, data processing that we're struggling in terms of identifying the who is the actual patient.
Yeah.
And even better if the Blue Cross and other peers will start using the same common keys.
Yeah, I 100% agree that is a useful service. It's like a perfect shared service, is do that identity resolution in the middle and expose all known identifiers and possibly the golden demographics that we have. And the golden demographics, in case it's not obvious to everybody, would be for Trisha, again, like what is the like composite view of Trisha's demographics? Like, what do we think are her correct demographics?
Okay, perfect. So Michael asks, so when I get a not matched return, does it create an identity? So I think you're referring to the no match feedback files that you get when you submit an APS file into the QMI use case. You get an error file and you get a no match file, and that details all of your records, which payer each record went to, or in the case of not finding a match to any payer's ACRES file, it'll denote that as well. So so does it create an identity? So no, that is just a report saying we look at each of your records you submit at the demographics and common key if you populate it, and we attempt to make a match to one of the participating payers. And if we do not find a match in any of those populations of the participating payers of this use case, then we report that back to you. So it's a little, it's specific to this use case, right? But I can explain deeper on a sidebar, Michael, as well.
And Michael, just because I probably said something that was a little contradicting that, there's two main requests to Common Key Service. There's a search, and then there's a search and register. So if you do a search and register, it means I'm going to give you these patient demographics. I want you to look in your EMPI and then tell me if you have any identities that this matches. And if you do, return it. And if you don't find it, create a new identity.